Yes, of course, I do think everyone can enjoy opera. I don't think everybody will necessarily enjoy opera. Personally, I don't much like football, um, uh, but I can watch a game of football. I have watched an enormous number of games of football in my life. Um, it's completely available to me. I can afford it, and I know how it goes, and I'm open to it. So I'm not going to say that every single person in the world will automatically respond to opera, but I think I will say that pretty much everybody in the world, somehow or other, will respond to the idea of a sung story. Um, uh, and that of those, an enormous number are perfectly capable of having a amazing experience from an opera, as long, if you like, as long as the opera speaks in a language which they can access. And I mean speak a language in the broadest possible sense. I don't mean in the sense of the language that the opera is sung in, but the whole communicative thrust should be sufficiently clear and potent and universal, that whatever the audience is, it finds a point of contact. Somehow or other, I expect opera will always survive because there will always be rich people. So in my own country, we have a terrible situation here where we have a very expanding industry for private opera. And a lot of the employment, in fact, now in Britain is summer festivals where very wealthy people pay to go to an exclusive experience. But it takes no money from the taxpayer. It creates employment for singers and for orchestra and for artists, technicians. So it's not a bad thing. It's not in itself harmful. What is harmful is that is the impression that everybody takes away as who opera is for. Of course, opera is also for the rich, because when we say everybody, we don't exclude the 5% of the population, pretty much, who go to the opera. I mean, that the sad part of what you're saying, of course, is that 95% of the population don't go. But they don't go for many reasons, amongst which are that they can't afford it, that they haven't enough money, because performing opera costs an enormous amount of money. Very few people pay for a ticket the actual cost of performing an opera. And so in many, it's done either by state subsidy, sponsorship, ticket prices, all put together is pretty much how most places now function. The problem of our society, of course, is that, and the struggle, I think, of the moment, the reason that we see the rise of populism, and the rather ugly rise of populism, is that the establishment of whatever society it may be has kept things for itself and has made the world work in a way that works for the top 10%, or 5%. I mean, it's quite shocking, I think, that. And that is pretty much everywhere. It's as true as much in Russia as it is in the rest of Europe, and I have no doubt that that's also true in China, where the political establishment, I have no doubt, have a much better life than everybody else. I think the question is really, of course, opera can survive. I think the real question is, does opera, I mean, what's it for? So if your concern in creating art is the future of art, then I don't think you need to be particularly worried. I think if your purpose in being an artist and creating art is the future of society, if that's what you think art ultimately addresses, who we are, how we live together, and consequently how we will live together, if those are your concerns, then we are in some trouble, I think. Both because we badly need a platform to come together and have a discussion, because there is no discussion that I can see. There are opposing forces. The world's become rather like going to a conference. Now, you go to a conference and what happens? Everybody is waiting at that conference to state their claim, to say their bit. I do it myself. I know what I think. I'm looking for the window. Maybe it's because I'm giving a speech like this. Maybe I put my hand up to say what you think. And you listen insofar as you can find the opportunity to say your bit. There is no exchange at a conference. I have yet to be at a conference when there's been a genuine debate, when there's been a real exchange of views rather than a statement of opinions. We're all guilty of it. And art is actually the platform. Art is where you're not just stating a point of view, because of course a work of art is infinitely richer than a simplistic didactic message. But the nature of what is addressed, if it is universal, as any great work of art of course is, needs to speak universally. And here I think this is where we go wrong in opera. It's where we go wrong looking for the future of opera. We hide behind artistic values. We hide behind tradition. We hide behind the idea of quality, of excellence, of innovation. We hide behind that also. We create an endless series of values that mean we don't have to talk about whether it's speaking. The conversation is always about the how and not about the what. When we talk about, even when we create new operas, they're wonderful pieces. So often the discussion is about what it sounds like, how it's done, if it's effective, if it's theatre-wise. Very rarely does anybody talk about what it's about. The only thing really that matters. Partly, of course, opera has become tyrannized, I think, by the music. Of course, the music is fundamental to what an opera is, but it is harnessed to an idea and to a subject and to a theatrical world. We have over-fetishized the composer. Ridiculous phrases like what the composer wanted, what about the composer, such things as that. We've over-fetishized it so that in order to protect ourselves from a discussion. And to back away from really encountering the nature and the heart of a piece. How do we find recognition, which is basically all anybody is looking for in this stuff? How do we find the present in the past and the past in the present? Really basic stuff. Because nobody writes a piece about the past to talk about the past. And any piece of work, when it was written, was talking about the present. In that fundamental thing, I think, is where we go wrong often in opera, because what we choose to talk about is what was and not what will be and what is. So the sickness of nostalgia, the decadence of looking backwards, is rather stifling. And the focus and the concentration is in the wrong place. We don't do enough new opera, of course we don't, and that's one of the reasons why, but nor do we respect all the great works enough to understand that we're only performing them if they're about who we are now. We don't want a history lesson from an opera. We're not that interested in knowing who human beings were. What we want to understand is who we are. And in that way, it's very necessary to remove the rituals and to the codes and all the levels. I mean, the danger of opera is it's too encoded, and that it's not accessible, that you need to be too good at it to find your way to it. No, actually, I think you stand a chance of making opera democratic, surely as much with Fidelio as with something set in a modern prison. And indeed, the artificiality of opera, which is part of its great important quote, no, the fact it's mass, the fact that it's song, that you don't talk. It's not soap opera. It's not a play. It's not cinema. It's its own form, and via that non-natural thing of singing, so to speak, because we sing to each other, bigger truths come through. So in many ways, singing a television drama a much bigger problem than singing a Greek tragedy. I mean, all those great Greek plays were the opposite of domestic dramas, nor were they contemporary dramas. They were about a heroic age, no? They were, but they were told in a way which made you understand the world as it is now. So the stories, I'm not particularly interested in seeing an opera about Donald Trump myself. But maybe in 300 years' time or 200 years' time, he'll be a useful thing to fit some kind of piece on. Maybe he'll be some ludicrous Beckmesser kind of figure. But I think it's the subject matter. It's the profound sense of who we are, not the sense of how we've built our society that we want to talk about. So it isn't about whether it appears to be about the world or not. It's about whether it hits you in the gut, whether, no, and that's poetic. That's not the news. Hits you in the gut, but in a different way. So new operas, of course, yes, because it's necessary for the art form to continue to examine itself and to procreate. Everything that happens pretty much is innovative, and anything that isn't doesn't, anyway, is embarrassing. But an act of creation is innovative. Otherwise, it's an act of imitation. And that's stillborn, no? So obviously what I spend most of my time to is trying to recreate, is trying to create again. But that's about it's about cracking the code. It's about all we have that we're given, even by a new composer in a new opera, we still only have the code. We don't have the substance. We have indications of the substance. In searching to understand what lies behind that code, where it comes from, and bring that to life, which is the really important thing. In that area is where we need to find a way of decoding, of going beyond the code in a way that is alive for everybody listening and watching. And some of that is about helping open the ear, opening the mind, opening the eyes, so that you receive. So that, like tuning into a radio, in the old days, you used to turn knobs to turn into a radio sound, and it would go fuzzy, fuzzy, fuzzy. There's a moment when it suddenly is incredibly clear. That's the moment you're trying to find for every single person in the audience. That's the challenge. How do you remove the out of focus, the fuzziness, the almost, and get it to that moment where it's so clear that it's undeniable? I hate the phrase community operas. If you saw them, they're fantastic. They just happen to involve all those people. But I mean, Otello in Birmingham was better than Otello at La Scala. There was, so I think it's important not to give a word which automatically qualifies it, diminishes it. What I do in Birmingham is opera, full stop. Well, I'm in a singular position, of course, because I have a reputation on one level, which helped me in the first place to find the support to make the experiment. But the nature of what we do in Birmingham and what is essential is that we put together the audience and the audience involved in and becoming part of the opera with the best possible musical experience. So there's no compromise. In fact, it's the exact opposite. What I generally say is everybody who's involved in the performance, including the audience, contributes to a unique and special event. So, which is why the events are so rich and textured. The method's quite simple, really, that we have people from the city, volunteers, people we target and bring in who act within it. We also now have a volunteer chorus, but it's not a permanent chorus. From each show to show, we change it 50%. So we're not a non-professional opera company. We're a constant process of renewal and re-examination. All of those people, so all of the people who act, they're not from drama companies and students and so on. They're people we get from around the city, and they represent more or less the demographic of the city of Birmingham. Which means not less than 40% Black and mixed ethnicity. It's a very high level in Birmingham. So that means not less than that amongst the actors and amongst the chorus and amongst the soloists, where we normally go for a 50 to 60% casting of Black and mixed ethnicity. It's quite high. All of this is at least so that the opera bears some relationship to the world outside. When we have some smaller, depending on the size of the production, if we have a slightly smaller orchestra, we book our own orchestra. And at that point, we manage also to do maybe 30% diversity in the orchestral players. When we use the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, there are maybe 1 or 2 people in a sea of white faces. And it becomes very obvious. Very obvious. So that immediately opens us to a different kind of audience recognition. That all of the participants, of course, sell tickets to their own incredibly cheap tickets. So all of the tickets are cheap. Whoever you are, you get the top price is £20. There's only one price, except, of course, we have enormous numbers of reasons for giving you tickets for £7.50. If you're a volunteer, if you're under a certain age, if you're over a certain age, lots and lots of people come for £7.50, the price of less than the price of a cinema ticket. If you want to shift the audience to opera, you have to have low ticket prices. It's where every discussion stops. And it's where you know when the people are well-meaning, but they're not actually prepared to do anything about it. That's the, you know, I mean, for instance, you're in Lisbon, aren't you? If the government wanted everybody to go to the Sao Carlos, they'd give the company enough money to have low ticket prices. But they don't. They don't. And that's the big problem in the middle of the whole thing, is they don't really believe that it's possible, I think. And sometimes I do it, of course, sometimes I make things happen that open up the idea of what theatres can be and who they can play to. But only in my own company do I set the ticket prices. And I'm under endless pressure to put them up, because we could sell for much more money and fill and sell all the tickets, but they wouldn't be to the people I want to sell the tickets to. I mean, it's really basic, because we don't make all the tickets available at the same time online either. Of course not, because then the people who come are the people who know about booking tickets, the kind of person who knows about deciding a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before what they're going to do. Whereas the audience that we need to include are people who suddenly think, oh, I'll go tonight. Or say to someone, oh, what are you after? Yeah, I'm going to go. Yeah, no, we're doing the opera tonight. Oh, I think I might come tonight. It has to be that spontaneous and available if you want to open the audience up. So every aspect of what you look at, you have to remove assumptions. That, I think, nobody says shh in our performances. We allow mobile telephones, we allow photographing. There are no announcements at all telling you what you can't do. And there are no rules. The venues are, everybody's standing up, and the chorus and the actors and the singers are all mixed up in one place, and moving around. It means as an audience member, you have to be aware, because you have to move, and you have to choose where you're going to stand. You don't get a seat told and you sit there, and that's your viewpoint for the whole performance. You turn around, you move towards somebody singing, you can't be bothered, so you lean against a wall, your choice. And if you can't see, you can move. If you don't move, it's your fault you can't see. Really simple rules, no? Like that is how it functions. And so people begin to want to follow the story, and the story moves away from them, they walk following it. It's a choice, it's engaged, and you're physically engaged, and you're breathing the same air as the singers. You can see their sweat, their spit. It's a very, very different experience as being protected by the darkness. You have theatre lights in your eyes. Of course you do. You're not always, sometimes you're in darkness, but sometimes you're in bright light and half the audience is looking at you. You feel you're in the performance. All of these things help to put the audience in touch with the vibration of the piece. So what they feel from opera singing is not something strange and weird on the other side of a big black hole behind a frame, but what they feel is the physical intensity, the energy, and the athletic virtuosity, if you like, of producing these enormous sounds right next to them. It's impressive, it's thrilling, and it's actual. And in my shows, people don't try to hide the fact that they're singing. They exploit the singing as part of the dramatic expression. We don't do theatre, we don't imitate cinema or theatre. We imitate Greek tragedy, if anything, I think. Being stuck in a chair for 3 hours is not, in the contemporary world, such a positive experience. But being on your feet for 3 or 4 hours is fine, because you've always got that you're not trapped. It's all, you're there because you want to be there. And if you want to go and sit down, you can. If you want to, the choice makes people feel much more open and less trapped. Indeed, when our audience go to operas in the theatre, they're always a little bit disappointed. It's very liberating. It's much easier, actually. Much easier is the truth. It's much harder on a stage, because you're creating in 3 dimensions, not in 2. Basically, there is no front. You're just bringing things alive. You have to rehearse. God knows you have to rehearse, because for musical ensemble, that takes some time to live with and get used to and know. But it's much easier. It's more fun. It's more spontaneous. And once they get over the shock, of course, the singers love it. I mean, they are liberated by it, because they're not having to worry about singing that way or that way while they're doing a love duet, or they just walk through it. And the performance, of course, they have to perform in 360 degrees. So they're performing for the people behind them as well as the people in front of them. There has to be a scale which is really good for an opera singer. To produce your voice really well, you have to think about all the back of your ribcage expanding and opening. Your whole body is alive, feeling and breathing, not just the front part here, but all the back. So when that's on the move, when that's breathing and pumping, it's as thrilling to be behind it as it is to be in front of it. I mean, some of that obviously was what I exploited in the Lisbon Ring cycle, of course, which was audience all the way around. It enables you to do a much bigger sense of performance, which is the theatre of opera. It's epic. I think the only hopeful, positive thing will be if, as we come out of it, there's more imagination applied to how we perform. Because it'll be a while yet before you can put 2,000 people in an auditorium and 100 people in an orchestra pit, I think. But we can't wait that long to do live performances. Nobody can pretend that all of the streaming that's happening is of much interest at all, frankly. I expect much more when I go to a performance, and when I try and create a performance of opera, I try and give much more than I'm able to receive through a screen. So certainly that's not the future of opera, though digital elements will inevitably become part of the future of opera. But it won't just transfer to the screen any more than the theatre has transferred to the cinema. They're two separate things. I hope people will have understood both the incredible gift and value of being on your own, which I think we're not talking about enough. I think we're so obsessed with communicating, and because we use the word isolation, therefore we're waving, we're talking on the phone, everybody knocking on your door, we go to the windows and clap. Horribly here, Victory in Europe Day happens this week. We're all meant to go to our windows and sing a song. And there's a kind of obsession. What I think we've missed the chance to is to talk to people about how to be on your own, about how to reflect, about the incredible value of stillness, of silence, of looking inwards. I think there's not been enough talk about that. The advantage is as soon as the doors open, people can't wait to get out, I think. But part of the amazing experience of being of a communal experience of being at an opera is knowing that you're sharing the moment, but yours is in your own personal way. That's what's fantastic. It's not a mass thing. It's not a hysteria response. What it is a lot of people going to that part of themselves where they feel, reflect their inner world, their inner life, and being in that place alongside other people, being in that places. It's a beautiful thing. It's 2,000 people reflecting, contemplating, feeling without the need to contact other people. And I don't think we talk about that enough, about the preciousness of it and about how these great works of art in relation to the audience do not produce the same thing. No two people experience the same work of art, because what they bring to it with them is the other half of what's happening, which is why the job is to be to make the event as porous as possible, as open to people to find their way in. But every new person who finds their way in has a different way of listening and perceiving what's happening. The sum total of those creates the performance, which is basically why I used the word rich in terms of Birmingham. That the truth that hangs in the air is communal, but everybody's idea of what that truth is their own. That was quite a good thing to end. That was a good line to end on. That is what I think.